Hey, check it out.
Hey,
Party
hey.
people. I
I
forgot that
wasn't
I
sure
had to
which.
send you a request.
No, it's all good. I wasn't sure which account to invite, so I sent a bunch of both.
I don't do a lot of Instagram live, so I'm still working out the technological glitches. What's
It's fine.
going on?
You're on, so
Sound
we're good.
sommelier?
Nothing much shaking.
I'm chilling. I'm
Yeah.
kicking it at home. You know what
How
I mean?
how cold is it up there?
It's about 45 today. Um, let's see. At the moment, hold on, check this out, right? What is the weather right now? Alexa says
Oh, don't say that name too loud. We have one in our house too.
38. It's 38 right now.
Not even close to 45. Okay. I
How
mean, that's
about where
not too
you're
bad
at?
for. Oh, it's warm. I think it was like 55 today or something in
And let the
Brooklyn.
people know. Let the people know what city you're in.
Brooklyn, raised the.
Brooklyn. Hey,
So
I'm
thanks
in
so much for
Ithaca, New
joining
York.
me.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the
Uh,
invitation.
oh, anytime. This is Laura, aka the Sound Sommelier, talking with Ben Ortiz from the legendary Cornell Hip Hop Collection. Ben, what's your earliest memory of hip hop?
Are we legendary now? Hold up.
I think so.
Wow.
You
I'm
you
humbled.
don't think so? It's been more than 10 years, right?
Legend. Are you a legend after 10 years?
When you do what you guys have done, I think so.
Well, I'll give credit to all the other people. What's my
Mhm.
first memory of hip hop? Is that the
Mhm.
question?
Yeah, earliest memory.
Um, I remember being in, for some reason, I remember that it was specifically second grade, um,
Nice.
which was for me, that was in 1985.
Okay.
All right. Um, I just turned 42 for those of you doing the math, right?
Woohoo!
Um, yeah.
I'm not far
Um,
behind you.
no doubt. It's all good. It's a good thing to be mature, age like a fine wine,
Mhm.
right? We could
Mhm.
talk about that.
Yeah.
I remember at the time, 85, maybe 86. Um, this was at the sort of what we might call the start of the quote unquote golden era. For a lot of people, golden era is a relative term,
Yeah.
but we're talking about the sort of the rise of um, the Def Jam records, namely LL Cool J. His first album is 85. So that was like all the rage at the time. Beastie Boys followed that closely, but that was 87. So I suppose that was maybe just a year later. What I'm talking about, 86. I remember the Fat Boys was out. Run DMC was out. Um, Mind you, I'm in second grade, so it's not like I can give you a story of like my
Right.
first memory of hip hop was going to this park jam when I was 18 and whatever. But what I remember very specifically was everybody in school being into the latest whatever. Run DMC, LL Cool J, Fat Boys really stand out in my mind. Beastie Boys later on was a big deal. Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince was a big deal later on. But I will say this, in second grade, I remember hearing, this is very vivid in my mind, and I tell this story frequently because I get asked a question of this nature. And I have to say, I remember being completely enamored with Buffy the Human Beatbox from the Fat Boys when I was in
Mm.
second grade, right? So I learned how to imitate what Buffy was doing. So I learned how to beatbox, if by imitating Buffy. Um, so all the kids in school would be like, "Yo, do that, yo, do that, yo, do that," and then they'd come out with they'd recite a Run DMC rhyme or something like that, and we were
Mm.
just second graders, kind of imitating what we
Adorable.
saw. There was quite a lot of hip hop being explored in, you know, national media. There were news reports starting to be, what is this? What is this new rap music? Is it really music? You know, news reports like that. Movies like Breaking, right? Beach Street. Those things were very popular, and they were somewhat accessible when they would show them on a, you know, Sunday afternoon on channel whatever. In what felt like, well, it felt like every other month, but it wasn't. It must have been about once or twice ever. You know how your memory can be a little funny about, like when you were a kid, every adult is about 15 feet tall, you know, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
So that actually is my first memory of hip hop. So I would say, you know, it wasn't just a curiosity to me. It wasn't just a sort of, oh, I remember that. It was a thing that I felt like kind of was a critical part of me and my classmates, my peers in school, on my block. It was just like part of us. I don't remember very many older siblings who were like super nuanced about it in anybody's case. I'm the oldest in my family, so I didn't have an older sibling into it. But what we all had were parents who were telling us, most of the parents would say something like, you know, that's not music, or they didn't really understand it, or it felt like
just don't understand. Yep.
Parents just don't understand. Very aptly said by a very famous poet, of course.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, for me, I'm fortunate to have a father who is somewhat of a music buff in his own right, and very, very fond of learning about music, learning about music from different areas of the planet, different eras in history. And instead of being the parent who would say, boy, turn that off, that's not real music, I'll show you what real music is, he would ask me to explain what it was and why I liked it. Well, yeah. Well, what is that? Why do you like that? And I swear to you, he's been like that all the way up until like now. Okay. He'll be like, oh, I heard about this on NPR or something like that. What do you think? What do you think of this guy, this person, whatever? I'll never forget one time. I might be going too deep in the question, but I was a teenager.
Keep going.
I was a teenager and in high school, and METHOD Man had just dropped, right? Wu-Tang's probably the second single that came off that album. And I remember kind of like bugging out about how much I loved it. And he seemed real raw and gritty. And you could hear him lisping a little bit and inhaling, like you could hear all his saliva, you know what I mean, in between Method Man's verses or whatever. When he was catching his breath, it sounded like he had to spit, you know what I mean? And I remember my father was like, wait a minute. I remember you listening to the Fresh Prince, and he's very clean, and I can understand everything he's saying, and he sounds way more polished. Why do you like this guy? This guy sounds like not as, you know, my father was thinking about it from like a, you know, this person isn't as good as this person. Anyway, I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunity my whole life to be in a position where I'm explaining something about hip hop to somebody who doesn't understand it. And I still am kind of doing that when I'm in front of audiences and classes, is breaking down what is hip hop. You know, I really relish that type of intergenerational dialogue. So that is a very long answer to your question, I realize, but
my favorite kind.
You know, yeah, I'm as you noted, you and I had a conversation a couple of days ago on the phone. You said I believe it was the word verbose. Is that what you said?
No,
Something
I wouldn't
like
have said that, but in depth maybe.
AKA nerdy.
I
All good.
don't want people to ever feel like they have to be rushed to answer. I understand some people aren't as verbose, I guess we could say that word now, but I appreciate when people kind of dig deep and kind of nerd out a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I do. That's
But
what I do.
something you just said, I remember while during my research, I read that you appreciate that a lot of times you talk to people that are aware of hip hop's beginnings and history, and then sometimes you talk to crowds that like literally have zero idea about it. So,
Yeah, and I think I don't necessarily like to. Well, I guess you're interviewing me, and I'm usually on the other side of that equation. But
I
so in
meant to
this
bring that
case,
up, yeah.
yeah, if I'm talking about my own skill set as a teacher, as a communicator, one of the things that's been said to me time and again, which I find to be a compliment of the highest order, is that I'm comfortable um, and comfortable and clear and able to really engage almost any audience, no matter the age, no matter the background of knowledge about hip hop. You know, provided I'm, with extenuating circumstances, of course, but whether I'm talking to middle school students who came to, because that happens. We get audiences of all stripes. Sometimes a middle school student, middle school teacher reach out, even elementary. Sometimes that gets a little harder to give a real history lesson to. So then it's more about, listening to music. What do you like about it? Same thing that, like I said, my pops was doing with me. But also Schoolhouse Rock. What is a DJ? Yeah, that kind of stuff. But also when I have the privilege of being in a room full of real hip hop heads, I shouldn't say real hip hop heads. I should say deep hip hop heads. People who are in many instances more knowledgeable than me,
or willing to learn more. Right.
Sure. I'd say that's two distinct groups.
Okay.
I think no matter what your level of hip hop knowledge is, you really should be craving more knowledge. That is what I call a hip hop cultural value. If we're going to call this a culture, right, then we got to identify what our cultural values are. Yo, shout out to Crazy Legs who just got up in here. Crazy Legs this is fantastic that he joined at this moment, because I was just about to say, when I find myself in a room with people who have absolutely they have forgotten more about hip hop than I've ever known, right? What I love to do is just kick back, be quiet, and listen. It's like hanging out with my uncles back in the day. I just kick back and listen, you see? And Legs, he is one of the deepest hip hop scholars I've ever been around. And I'm using the word scholar on purpose. I don't believe it's about degrees, piece of paper on the wall. It is about lived experience, actual examination of the culture. And yet I know that he absolutely is always seeking new knowledge. That is absolutely, because that's a cultural value of hip hop. You are not supposed to go, okay, I'm done. I
got it.
Always be a student. Yeah, that's word up. I'm not even if he wasn't in here right now, I would tell you the exact same thing. But being around audiences of any comprehension level is nevertheless very inspiring to me. It's a privilege to be able to communicate what I know, and it's a privilege to be able to add on to what I know. And I think that we all need to appreciate anybody's level of knowledge. I think that that's really important. That's part of my own, I guess, pedagogy, if you will, my educational philosophy. My man.
You can't frown upon people that don't have a lot of knowledge, especially if they're willing to learn more. So.
No, and I also think, being a hip hop head, I used the phrase deep hip hop head before. I guess it's a bit of a spectrum. but I think that there's a show and prove aspect to it. There's a certain value that we have. You know, it ain't where you're from, it's where you're at. If you're somebody who is showing, I'm committed to this, whether or not I know everything is not the point. Whether or not if you're a practitioner of the fifth element knowledge, or you're a practitioner of, DJing, b-boying, b-girling, whatever, seeking the knowledge about how to do that, learning from people who have, long established themselves in the community. That's what that really is all about. And no one would look at you, and it's not like a green belt, yellow belt, and finally black belt type of thing. There's always a progression, and you never stop growing. And there's never a moment where you go, aha, you have finally passed the test. Now you can call yourself a hip hop head. It doesn't quite work that way. Nevertheless, for those of us in the culture, we just know a hip hop head when we meet a hip hop head. So there's something interesting and intangible about it, you know? And I think it's really fun. It's really fun to chop all of that up, and nobody should ever act like a know-it-all. Nobody should be like, oh, yeah, I know what that is. You know what? Do not fake the funk. Whatever you do know is interesting to me. You know what I mean? Each one is teaching one. You got something to teach. This is breaking down our cultural values as hip hop heads. I'm very fascinated by that, because we put a lot of effort into talking about hip hop as a culture, you know. So let's analyze. Let's talk about it as we do other cultures. Shout out to my homegirl Anna Gunner, another dancer, just jumped up in here. What's up?
Okay, so second grade. Ben, where did you grow up, and how did your surroundings kind of lead you into pursuing DJing, even as a hobby, before it became something more serious than that?
So I'm from Detroit, Michigan, from Southwest Detroit, and for those who know, is the Verner Springwells neighborhood in Southwest Detroit. It's also where my father's from, and my father growing up there in the coming of age in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is an extremely rich time for music in the city of Detroit. Okay. Right. Going back to, certainly there's many different traditions, too many to even mention actually. But we have to mention the Motown movement, as well as Detroit classic rock. And this is all, 60s and 70s. I'm not even in the 80s yet when we get into techno. And then in the 90s, the hip hop scene really matures in Detroit. But, you asked the question about how I got into DJing. So, for those who may not know, I go by the name of DJ Hameen. What is DJ Hameen? What is Hameen? People ask me that question. My name is Ben Hameen.
I was just going to say, I figured that out.
I'm just, all I'm doing is giving my other two syllables some love with my DJ name. That's all it is. But I spell it out phonetically, because it's still spelled Jamin, which if I wrote that down, you'd say it was DJ Jammin', which I think that's kind of whack sounding, Jammin'. So it's Hameen, Hameen. I am always humble as a DJ. There are so many people that I look up to, and so many people that I've learned from truly legendary pioneers such as Bambaataa, all the way to my local brothers and sisters here in Ithaca, New York, who I've learned so much from. DJ Bella J, DJ Gord, my man Anthony Mansfield. Shout out to all these people who are local legends here, that I've learned so much from. I've only really been serious about calling myself a DJ and serious about booking myself gigs for about, I guess I'm going on about a decade with that now. Prior to that, I was just messing around. I would do a little house party here and there. Once in a while, somebody would like a colleague here at Cornell their DJ would cancel and need somebody for some kind of event. So I'd run through with records and CDs, and they'd have a little apparatus. I didn't even have my own gear. I think, though, it's interesting how this question is also actually it's really going to heavily relate to what I told you about my father. The discussions about music and culture, we were always sharing music with each other. My father would always be buying me new music. I can remember, here's an Eddie Palmieri album. Listen to this. Here's one in the mid '80s. There was a lot of like novelty rap records, and there was one of famous Christmas songs, but they were being rapped. So like jingle bells, jingle all the way, which was corny and almost culturally disrespectful. I didn't really know that when I was in whatever third grade, but my father thought that was intriguing. Here, listen to this. So I would always take the opportunity to play music for my father. Like I said, why else would I be playing Method Man for my father? You know, that's part of my earliest memories of music. Okay. So sharing music is what I like to call the nucleus of the atom of DJing. All right. So if a DJ is made up of a bunch of atoms, the nucleus of those atoms is the drive and the desire to show and tell music. Listen to this. You got to hear this. Listen to this song that I heard that I love. What do you think of this?
That's crux of being a DJ. Yeah.
Absolutely. Of course, there's so many more things about being a DJ that's important. No question about it. But I think it's important to really recognize for everybody, for every DJ, where did you get that spark? You know, I know that for me, it really does relate to my father. And then that translated to, you know, friends in school and wanted to be like, yo, I got this newest tape or whatever. Listen, we used to tune into the radio. When I was in middle school, my family moved to Albany, New York. And there was a college radio station from Siena College. You've all heard of Siena College with the latest Siena polls in the presidential race. They have a very famous political polling center, but they have a very famous, a very dope local, at least in the 90s, college radio station that would play all the newest underground hip hop. That's where, you know, that was my main thing in high school, listening to that station. So I have a bit of an off the beaten path story in terms of my origins. From here to there, living where I live now, working what I'm forever an outlier in that regard, and that's all good. But that's part of why I like talking to people, because the more you can get people to communicate their individuality, I think that's freeing. I think that's something that helps people realize that part of being involved in hip hop culture is having the ability to express your own particular flavor, your own particular self, all while contributing and being part of this organism, the hip hop community. You know, I'm sure, you know, there's a discussion right here to be had about, you know, quote unquote music today, which I have to put that in quotes because
yeah.
Music today is wide and varied. But talking about music today, quote unquote, is that there's a lot of hip hop artists in the music industry, in the mainstream music industry, striving to copy a formula of the last person who was successful.
Right.
You know, striving to replicate the formula. It's like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. You know, if we can replicate essentially what that's like, we'll make money. So I think that a lot of people have probably lost sight of some of those ethos of the earliest iterations of the hip hop community, right?
Mhm.
Being individual while also being part of a collective organism. Um,
If I could cut in really quick, maybe
yeah.
not even lost sight, maybe never even learned about that ethos, like never even had access or exposure to it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I guess I was just speaking
I know
as
what
a
you're
collective, yeah,
saying.
global community. But this is part of the intergenerational dialogue. Um, so, uh, if I'm able to communicate that concept to, as I said, middle school students, high school students, college students, the freshmen this semester were born in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If you're born in 2002, it's not a foregone conclusion that by the time you become more of a consciously aware hip hop fan, you're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily going to have a great deal of access or impetus to learn about what came before you.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the major, I think, cultural values of doing the knowledge, right? The fifth element of hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Doing the knowledge, right, is an interesting phrase, but essentially doing your math, right? Some of this is 5%ing language, 5% of language, but essentially striving to learn about what came before you, because that's always going to be what's more mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody, just think about 5 years before you were born, and that period in time seems very alien and distant. Whereas 5 years after you were born, you can kind of go, oh, I think I can relate to that. And for those of us been around long enough, you can understand that like a decade is a long period of time, but it's not an ocean of time, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So again, I really appreciate intergenerational dialogue in both directions. I'm in a sweet spot right here in my early 40s.
Yeah.
There's a lot of older heads who I have so much to learn from. There's a lot of newer heads who I have a lot to learn from, but I also have a great deal of knowledge and perspective to give to them. It's not to be paternalistic or parental. Um, that's not what this should be about. This should really be about each one teach one.
Right.
You've heard that phrase before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Just to comment on what you said, though, I remember waiting in line for a Stussy in store with Tribe years ago, and I was online with these three young kids, and I was like, how do you guys know about Tribe? And they're like, our parents taught us, and I was like, thank God.
Well, isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we hip hop is multi-generational. There are grandparents and in some cases great grandparents who are squarely in one of
Yeah.
the one of the one of the so-called hip hop generations.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my grandparents, were already grandparents by the time Herc did the merry-go-round with breakbeats in '73. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, it's really interesting to look at hip hop from a sociological perspective, not just a musical perspective. You know,
Yeah, very much.
yeah.
Just back to your DJing. When you go, or when you used to go, or even now when you go digging, do you typically spend time with certain genres more than others, just with your broad exposure to music from your father and from where you're from?
Well, when yeah. Uh, so one of my things that I like to do as a DJ is genre jump, right? Zigzag between genres, trying to find a coherent thread through different songs, different genres. It's certainly, that's not at all something I came up with. I consider myself in many ways a disciple of Bambaataa, if that makes any sense. And, you know, spending some quality time with Africa Bambaataa back in the early part of last decade, at the beginning of my time with in my role at the Hip Hop Collection, is what really inspired me to get serious about DJing. I also really want to shout out my man Rich Medina, who, you know, is one of Philly's finest, but he's also a Cornell University alumni and an alumnus, I mean. And I have spent a great deal of time with him over the years, and have learned so much from him. And he's also somebody who, you know, he's a card-carrying member of Zulu Nation, and really is a disciple of that school of thought where it's not about just playing music from a particular genre. It's about finding, as Bam would say, the funk in any genre. So when I go digging, I'm gonna separate that into two categories, specifically going to a record store versus, you know, building up my digital crates, which going digging is, I guess I would just call that sort of an ongoing music discovery listenership, right? That's what we're all actually doing with Spotify accounts and stuff like that. The difference with a DJ is, a DJ like myself, I'm going, oh, I like that song, and I make a note in an app that I have, which has a column of tracks I want to get, tracks I want to get column. It's over, I don't know, 7-8 years has grown into many thousands of songs, which actually these days it's not actually about purchasing music so much anymore, because everything is moving to streaming accounts a la Netflix. So Spotify is like a Netflix account. I had to explain this to a student recently. A student was talking about his music collection. And I said, tell me about your music collection. I want to hear about it. I like to talk about music collections. Like, how do you do it? Right. And he said, well, I have my hip hop playlist.
Oh.
I've got my EDM playlist. And I said, playlist?
Oh.
What do you mean by playlist? And he said, you know, in Spotify, you add things to a playlist. And I had to explain to him how that's a bit like your bookmarks in a web browser. You can arrange them however you want, but the minute somebody takes that website down, you don't own that music.
Right.
Once somebody else decides that track is no longer available on Spotify, you don't have it. So sometimes I just compare it to Netflix. You know how every month there's like movies leaving Netflix. You better watch this movie now. That happens in the streaming world, streaming music world as well. So a music collection, I think, is important to distinguish in that it's music that you actually own, from MP3s to vinyl, and everything in between. So anyhow, you know, when I'm in a record store, I usually make a beeline for the salsa section. I go for the funk section. I go to the hip hop section, but you know something? When I DJ, I most often am in a situation where I'm really trying to rock a dance floor. I'm trying to get people dancing. Not so much a lounge experience. People are just head nodding, half paying attention, talking to somebody. You know, whether I'm doing a nightclub or a wedding, the general purpose for me is making people dance. So I tend to think in terms of, I need to acquire music that will fit in some thought pattern where I'm probably able to play that song before or after that song or whatever. But
Mhm.
shopping for vinyl, sometimes you have time to sit down and sit at the little listening station in the record store and sit there for a few hours and decide, do I really want this record?
Right.
Or do I want to keep digging for something that I really truly want? Other times I don't have a lot of time and I just run up in the record store here in Ithaca, New York. Everybody should go to Angry Mom Records. My man George owns that store. Sometimes I just run up in there. I'm like, yo, George, I got 10 minutes. All I'm going to do today is look at album covers.
Nice.
I'm making my decisions based on the album covers. And he'll just be like, over there, I got some new stuff. Down there is a box full of stuff I haven't even looked at yet. And I'm just, and I'll run up out of there. I got some great early 90s merengue that way one time. I walked out with a stack like this. I hadn't listened to them at all.
You really just bought it based off the album cover.
Well, in that day, I bought it because he goes, that's a stack of merengue. And I didn't have a lot of
Oh,
merengue
okay.
on
So you knew
vinyl.
it was merengue. Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, an audience that is specifically there on quote unquote Latin night
Mhm.
isn't necessarily, they want to dance and partner dance. It's not so much like, yo, that mix was whack. It's not about mixing so much, or I don't really, the way that record doesn't really go with that record. It's less about that because sometimes there's a little bit of a clear break in between the songs, where you stop, you give your partner a hug, and then you go dance with somebody else.
Mhm.
Musical chairs. Otherwise, I have quite a lot of vinyl, but I don't have as much. I don't have a fraction of the vinyl of some DJs that. I mean, for example, I know that you somewhat recently interviewed Scheme Richards.
Mhm.
Um, that is not the level of digging that I'm on.
No
That
way.
is, I would like to, I would like to go Luke Skywalker on him and treat him like
Mhm.
Yoda. And I'll be
Yeah.
like, yo, Scheme, teach me how to levitate a rock. You know what I'm saying? Because
He
that's,
probably would too. He's the nicest guy. Yeah.
yeah. Or Rich, who I mentioned before, Rich Medina.
Mhm.
Or
Yeah,
at
I
one
interviewed
point in
Rich years
time,
ago.
did you? Yeah, Rich is
Mhm.
that dude. Uh, years ago, Bambaataa like stopped really voraciously acquiring vinyl and became
Mhm.
an advocate of digital DJing, as did Red Alert. A lot of folks that you would tend to think clearly only play vinyl. No, they were early advocates of digital DJing because they recognize the ability to have all my records on this machine in front of me. What? At any time?
Not have to
Uh,
lug them all around. Yeah.
Not have to pay to lug them around. That is
Mhm.
exactly, the benefit is clear. And frankly, well, so what I tend to do 99% of the time as a DJ is digital. Because I can have everything I own right there with me. And I believe that allows me greater creativity and flexibility with
Mhm.
song selection, and really whatever audience walks in there, I can go, I probably got something for this group right here. Um, Not to mention anything about, the transportation issues with vinyl. When I do a vinyl gig, it is, a little bit more, um, laid back, or there's a big music festival here every summer, except for this past summer.
Right.
And myself and a few other local DJs play records at something called the Vinyl Lounge, which is this little kind of looks like like a little sort of a mini stage as you're walking around the festival grounds. And there's
Mhm.
big speakers and turntables and a mixer set up, and DJs are invited to play records throughout the festival weekend. Um, but it's vinyl only. So the limitation of the format that's
Mhm.
interesting to me. That's exciting to me.
That's
It's
kind
a
of like how
little,
DJs advertise now if they're doing an all vinyl set.
yeah, yeah, because I can promise you most dance floor audiences, like in general, don't really care what format you're using,
Mm-hmm.
for better or for
I agree.
worse.
I agree.
As much as
Mm-hmm.
we want them to care, you know, it's a funny world when a DJ with Serato and MP3s and a controller, right,
Mm-hmm.
feels like, yo, what's up with that other DJ who's just plugging in his phone in his Spotify account? I had to work for this, which is
Mm-hmm.
funny because many years ago, vinyl DJs felt that way about Serato users
Mm-hmm.
or Tractor or any actual software. There are several these days.
Yeah.
Um, so the march of technology is constant, and the people who have embedded themselves in the previous generation of technology will always feel like the newest people, the newest DJs using the newest technology without a real appreciation or invested work in the previous generation of technology is cheating somehow,
Right.
right? Um, I have a funny comparison to that. I don't want to. The best thing I've discovered in talking to audiences about this dynamic is photography.
Okay.
All right, photographers who had to hone their craft using film,
Mm-hmm.
not only just film and the characteristics of film, but the idea that there's only a finite number of shots on each roll of film. And then there's the delay in seeing if you got the right shot. You have to wait until it's developed. And for the much more involved photographers developing the shot in the darkroom, which I've done a lot of myself. I have a fine arts degree in college. I was a painting major, but as a result of my studio arts degree, my fine arts degree, I had to spend a lot of time in a darkroom, and I did quite a lot in high school as well. And that was
And
before
you have a
digital
lot of layers,
photography.
I gotta say.
I thank you. I like to call myself, the proverbial jack of all trades, master of none.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so uh, digital photography comes along, and there's a point in time where it's not really able to compare to the quality of film. Then rapidly the technology advances, and it turns into the absolute go-to technology. And anybody who's using film these days is a fine artist whose process
Right.
involves film, and you're supposed to feel like, oh, the process is what's important. The same way we feel when we go to a vinyl night
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, you're supposed to go, oh, they're using vinyl. That's supposed to factor
That's
into
why
your
it sounds that
appreciation
way.
for,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, 10 years ago, we could have said vinyl sounded better. Today, with these super high resolution WAV and AIF files, you can get much more clarity
Yeah, but I think
than
better is
vinyl ever
relative
could.
because some people like myself, not that I prefer it, I enjoy sometimes like the warmth that people always talk about with vinyl.
Yes, you can simulate warmth in there's an effect you can
Oh, you can.
apply,
All right.
to digital warmth. Warmth, uh, 9 times out of 10, I hear it characterized as the hissing and the popping and the dust and the scratch.
Mm-hmm.
The scratch is not scratching like a
Right, right.
turntablist, but
Like
the
actual.
imperfections,
Mm-hmm.
on the surface of the record, the characteristics of the needle. If you really are paying attention to what that truly means, um, I don't know. Warmth is an interesting way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I appreciate it,
For
but I
lack of
know
a
it
better
can be
word.
simulated. Yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
can be simulated just the same. So, um, you're right. Better is totally a relative term. There's no question about that. I can tell you one thing. The minute a record skips while you're dancing and you
Yeah.
suddenly find yourself off beat, there's no comparison these days,
Mm-hmm.
we all have a soft spot in our heart for something, So
Mm-hmm.
I think vinyl should always be appreciated, and I think everybody who dares call themselves a DJ should experiment at the very least, if not in fact own and periodically play vinyl. I think there's a very clear connection with uh, a very clear connection with with the past, with your cultural and artistic ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
forebears. Um, there's an appreciation about the trajectory of what you're doing. And, again, calling yourself a DJ is to place yourself into a community that does value tradition, that does, however, also value technology, but it also values perspective on that technology. Um, so it's not necessarily about whether or not you're using vinyl. It's about if you can appreciate what you're doing and the history of the people that came before you. You can say the same thing about dancers and MCs, graffiti writers, of course, you know, um, culture evolves, technology evolves.
You need to evolve with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell
Um,
you the amount of people that I've asked that question to, like, do you prefer the analog or the digital? And they say that, yeah, there was a time when they didn't want to go with the digital, but if they didn't kind of move with the times, they would have been left behind. So they had to figure it out.
yeah. There was a time when, in my own DJing experience, there was a time when I started noticing DJs, you know, so and so got booked at a particular bar or something, and they show up with just a laptop,
Mm-hmm.
no mixer, and they are just using a laptop, or they're streaming the music from their Spotify account out of the headphone jack.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me went, "What? I've been working hard to learn this software. I've been working hard to collect my digital music,
Valid.
which again, for somebody who is coming from a completely vinyl world, it's like boo hoo, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's what got me thinking about, hey, look, if you're rocking that crowd, you're rocking that crowd. That's not something you can fake. So it
Yeah.
becomes important to stop and go, hold up, that person's going to evolve in their DJing, and I possibly can learn a thing or two from them. So today I actually do have a Tidal account that is able to feed into my Serato. I gotta pay for it, but I would be paying for that music anyway if I was purchasing it all and struggling to back it all up on external hard drives and so forth. So I like the
Mm-hmm.
hybridized approach. Sometimes I go to a gig and plug a turntable into the mixer so I can have vinyl, digital, and streaming. Um, to me, that's just interesting. It's like having an extra tube of paint. I don't want to
I
go
like
too
it.
deep into the paint metaphor. So there's like flesh
Mm-hmm.
tones, right? It's very hard.
Uh-huh.
It's very hard to mix flesh tones. You have to know how to mix in flesh tones. And a lot of people don't know that the secret ingredient to making a convincing flesh tone is a dab of blue. Okay? No matter whose skin tone you're trying to replicate, it has to have a dab of blue in it. Um, Sometimes they have flesh tones pre-made in a tube. And I was
Right.
like studying painting in college. That's cheating. I had to learn how to
Cheating.
do that. you know, um, but it's not really about that. It's about looking at each individual artist and going, the tools and the knowledge at their disposal is the tools and the knowledge at their disposal.
And how they're
And
using
you
them.
have,
Yeah.
you got to sit back and appreciate what a person is doing. You got to, and in the case of DJing, I'm always stopping and going, hey, that person can't, that DJ, maybe they can't mix worth a damn. Maybe they're even in some cases playing an MP3 of pre-mixed songs, like 5 songs strung together, and acting like they're mixing it.
Turning the knobs.
Yeah. Or, somebody who's just clearly just got a laptop and Spotify. But if I'm sticking true to what I said about what the nucleus of the atom of DJing is, their song selection, whatever they're playing, is rocking the crowd, they're doing something valuable and worthwhile. They are curating an experience for these people out here on the dance floor. Whether or not they're being as creative as I would be about it or somebody else, it is debatable.
Right.
It's kind of like, let me zigzag onto another thing. I'm a big basketball fan. All right. There's been this debate in recent years about a step back jump shot and how the NBA relaxed its rules on something called a collection dribble. Or a collection possession, a collection step, I think it's called. You can't travel. You take 3 steps, you've traveled, you turn over the ball. But now they got something called a collection step where you can take a step while you're collecting possession of the ball. So some players have learned to really take advantage of that 3rd step on a step back jumper, James Harden, or really take advantage of the collection step in approaching the basket, a Euro step 1. It looks like they're traveling, but they're not. All right. Giannis Antetokounmpo. Antetokounmpo? Somebody help me with the pronunciation. The Greek freak. Some people say they're cheating. Well, the tools at their disposal are these rules that allow that, and it's showing results for them. And we have to recognize that's what's really going on in that person's life. We can debate forever about whether Giannis would beat MJ or Kobe. I don't know. That sure is fun to debate, though, isn't it?
I've had that debate way too many times with people.
Yeah, man.
I don't follow basketball too much anymore, but I was the biggest fan during the MJ era. So anyone saying that Kobe's better than MJ now is kind of, I can't really hear that.
I grew up, like I told you, I'm from Detroit, and I'm from Detroit in the 80s. I was a Bad Boys fan. And so when Jordan and the Bulls finally dethroned the Bad Boys Pistons in 91, MJ was a villain to me my whole life. MJ was a villain.
I was the worst New Yorker growing up. I was an Indiana Pacers fan.
Hey, all right, okay. I don't meet many of those.
Reggie Miller is the reason my lucky number is 31. So
that's dope. That's dope. You know what I love in sports? I love a hometown fan. Right? So
I'm not.
I
hated the Knicks.
Are you from New York? Or how'd you become a Pacers fan?
I think it's because I hated John Starks so much. I was like, what can I do that's like so anti-John Starks right now?
Who hates John Starks?
Oh
man.
I did.
Yeah, John Starks is a beast. Well, anyway, I think there are some really interesting comparisons to make across all this stuff. And I do this in class. I in explaining a concept, I'll explain something from another completely different thing. But I think that's useful. When we're talking about art and culture, it's never 1 + 1 = 2. You you can utilize other things from our human experience to help communicate a concept. And I really enjoy that type of dialogue with people,
So going back to your beginnings, who were some of your earliest Latino contributors to hip hop culture that you admired?
That I admired. Well, the first Latino I ever heard of in hip hop was Prince Marky D of the Fat Boys. Following that, I recall hearing a song called Mentirosa by Mellow Man Ace, who is. Say that again?
I know that song.
Yeah, it's a dope song. Mellow Man Ace is the older brother of Sen Dog from Cypress Hill. So that's just a fun little trivia right there. But, Mentirosa, that was like a big deal. I'm ashamed to say it is. I recall being in, I must have been in 5th grade, and I remember being very enamored with, oh, snap, Rico Suave, Gerardo, right? To a 6th grader, I didn't have the nuanced perspective on hip hop that I developed a few short years later in the backpacker mid-90s in high school. But, that was kind of a dope hit, and
sorry, can I interrupt you really quick? Did you watch Destroy's Show Off Your Gems show at all? Did you see the one where Gerardo was on?
No, I didn't. That doesn't. I bet that was hilarious, though.
I'm
gonna go back. First of all, shout out to Destroy. Shout out to everybody in Rocksteady. We're shouting a lot of Rocksteady cats.
Yeah.
Destroy. I want Destroy to get his own sketch comedy show because
I want him to get whatever it is he needs to get that I can watch him on a regular basis.
Yeah. The man, he's a comedic genius, and I didn't know he was funny like that. When I was very into the Arsonists when they first came out with their album As the World Burned. But just kind of like seeing him on social media over the years, Destroy, you put him up there with one of those like great comedic legends, maybe. I don't know. He'd be excellent in a sketch comedy show.
100.
But you know what? To your question, I'm naming musicians, but I should also mention specifically, speaking of sketch comedy shows, he's not a musician, but he is a performer of the hip hop generation who is a Latino. John Leguizamo had a show when I was in high school called House of Buggin'. And House of Buggin' was promoted as the Hispanic in Living Color, right?
Okay.
In Living Color, famously, In Living Color didn't have any Hispanic or Latino Latinx cast members, none that I am aware of at all. They had Fly Girls, of course, J-Lo.
Just gonna ask you. Yeah.
Yeah. So House of Buggin', it only lasted for one season, but it was absolutely hilarious. So I think when we're talking about the generation of people who are in the hip hop community in some way, shape, or form, I throw John Leguizamo in there. I believe he was an early influence. He was a person that I looked up to. He was a person who I derived some sense of, when you, somebody in some context, you kind of, I feel like I got a kinship with that person. I wish I could show you. So when I was in high school, he was in a movie called Carlito's Way. And he played a character called Benny Blanco. And my nickname in high school was Benny Blanco because I looked a little bit like he did in that movie with this like Caesar haircut and a very thin, like razor pencil mustache. So people still call me that. A lot of people from back in high school and college call me Benny Blanco because of John Leguizamo's character. There's one more thing I want to shout out. There's a group called Two in a Room. Okay. Two in a Room is they were in a genre called hip house. Of course, house music with rapping, you know. That's one of my favorite musical genres. I love hip house music, and it's got a lot to do with Two in a Room, and really getting into their sort of sound and flavor was a vibe that I really enjoyed as I was growing up. This is in the late 80s, early 90s, along with CNC Music Factory. You know, Robert Claveles, yeah, one of the DJs from CNC Music Factory. You know, he's still making a lot of noise, doing his thing. The other DJ was David Cole. I believe he passed away in I think it was the early 2000s. I'm gonna have to go back and check that. But yeah, I you know, I was really into groups like that. I wasn't such a deep house head until really I became a DJ, and I started exploring, learning a lot more about the history of house music and all of the many genres. You know, house is a massive musical umbrella, and there's so much to explore.
A lot of subgenres.
Yeah, there's so much to explore, and you know, you asked this question: who were some early Latinos in hip hop that I enjoyed, that I looked up to? Or yeah, there's a genre of music called Latin freestyle that a lot of people don't really know about. It's not unlike house music, but it's a little bit more like electro funk.
Yeah.
Think of, you know, Planet Rock or something like that. Sometimes there were rap verses in freestyle. More often than not, though, it was sort of certainly singing, but had like this kind of like almost like dark edge to it, very angsty, heartbroken music. And out of that, one of the groups at the top of that movement was called TKA. The K from TKA, K7, he went solo in 92, 93. His album, his first
K7,
album called,
like Zunga Zang K7? Okay.
That's right. Come Baby Come, Zunga Zang. Zunga Zang, by the way, by K7 is one of my favorite tracks to play as a DJ because I like to mix it with the Yellow Man, Zunga Zang, Zunga Zunga Zang, and then I speed it up and get into the solo of K7. I love it.
I would die
the sample, I mean. I absolutely, people are shocked when I ask, what are some of your favorite albums of all time? And I say Swing Batter Swing by K7, and some people are like, I never heard of that before. And people who have heard of it are like, really? But you know what? I played that cassette tape hundreds and hundreds. And I went through a lot of AA batteries in my early generation Walkman with the digital screen on it. I thought I was fly because it had a digital screen. I could talk music all day long, and yet I am always a little bit like, I have to point out, I am not even, there are people who might say, you know a lot about music. And no, I don't. Not compared to many of the OGs, many of the legends, many of the big brothers and sisters that I've been around. who I just want to shut up and soak up everything they're saying. I mentioned Bam. I mentioned Rich Crazy Legs, who was on a minute ago. I want to, his musical knowledge is extraordinary. Breakbeat Lou, or Encyclopedia, as I call him. Having conversations with him about music, those are some of the most mind-blowing conversations I've ever had about music. The intricate knowledge, the detail, oh yeah, I rubbed elbows with that person. Leave me completely, literally speechless. I feel like I've got nothing to contribute here. I'm just going to sit back and listen. And I absolutely adore those type of situations. As I said, you need to strive to be a student first. You need to strive to gain more knowledge in what you are interested in. There's always more to learn about anything, no matter who you are. Even somebody like, Breakbeat Lou, who I just mentioned, is still always learning and growing about music. And connecting with new and older, musicians to help create and collaborate. And that's what the life of a historian and an artist and a performer or a person who creates. That's what that's all about. But the only thing that really tops it is sharing the knowledge that you actually do have. So that's what I'm here to do today, I suppose. I don't want nobody out there get it twisted. I'm not the foremost music historian on planet Earth. Ha, not even close. I'm just like a music nerd. I love it. There's still so much to learn. I sit back, I kick it with musicians who are not from anywhere near hip hop, and I'm just like, I'm blown away watching this dude play like the oboe as a virtuoso. And it's just, there's something about music that is so fundamental and elemental and foundational to who we are as human beings, to our species, that I hope I am always able to access and be a part of music in some way. I got to say, that's the thing I'm missing most about given the pandemic and stuff, is being out there. Here in this community, in Ithaca, New York, we have a very vibrant music community, a very diverse music community. I just miss being out in that crowd. That's my tribe,
I think that's why people like listening to you, though, because I can tell.
Well, thank you. Some people say it's my vocal tone.
I mean, that too. But it's very relaxing.
I'm just playing.
I know.
I'm just playing.
So fast forward a little bit, you became an inaugural member of Cornell's Hip Hop Collections Advisory Board in 2007, but you didn't really take over management until 2011. What were some of the early initiatives that you kind of focused on in those early years?
Well, at the time that the Cornell Hip Hop Collection was founded, this was it officially began in July of 2007. The person who brought that first group of material to Cornell, her name is Catherine Reagan. She recognized, in working with this collector named Johann Kugelberg, who worked on a book called Born in the Bronx with Joe Conzo. Shout out to Joe. Shout out to Johann. They had material that they had in the production of that book. And of course, Joe, if you know Joe Conzo, the photographer, the man who took hip hop's baby picture, his life's work.
I've never heard that, but I love it.
Legendary and foundational and very important very important documentarian, one of the earliest documentarians of hip hop culture. You know, whether he knew it or not, to hear him tell it, I was a teenager in the Bronx with a camera. I was taking pictures of my friends.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out he was documenting hip hop's sort of childhood.
Right.
So he and Johan had material, and we're looking to find an institutional home for the material that went into the production of the book Born in the Bronx. And
Right.
Catherine Reagan, who is one of my mentors, maybe the most important professional mentor I've had, decided that material, when they presented it to her, she decided that material not only would be useful and exciting to scholars, students, professors, but it was something that could be added onto, not just a singular collection of material or one singular archive, but it could be built on. So in thinking about growing that enterprise, the hip hop collection, in 2007, when that arrived, you know, she knew that it was important cultural material, but she didn't necessarily know much about hip hop, right? So, you know, her job is to bring material that's useful and interesting to scholars, professors, students, as I said. But she knew that in order to do right by the material, she needed to work with a constellation of people who were a part of the puzzle of doing right by hip hop. So she put together an advisory board of people, starting with myself and a few other professional colleagues / friends at Cornell and Ithaca College, right across town, and then started adding other pieces to that advisory board to help guide in the development of the hip hop archives, the collection of archives. Sometimes people say, "Hey, what's that? What's that Cornell hip hop collection? Is that like a record collection?" And I understand that. That's an interesting perception. No, it is a collection of archives. Now, what are archives? I mean, you know, I'm sitting here taking notes while we're talking. You know, this piece of paper I'm writing on, if I save it and catalog it in a particular way and add it to, you know, a group of papers I have right over there on that chair, I've got an archive of the day. And then if I take all the documentation here in my home, cataloged it, and somebody was doing a report about me or something, they would have an archive to work from, right? So that's what we're talking about when we mean archives. But her foresight in putting together a advisory board proved really, really valuable, because it obviously guided Cornell through the process of establishing the hip hop collection. You know, how should this material be cataloged? How should it be represented online in the catalog?
Right.
How should it appear in exhibitions? How should it be taught with? How do you teach a class with this material? It's very specific, right? And if there's one thing we know in the hip hop community, it's that more than anything, we demand to be respected. Okay? Mm-hmm. Teaching with this material, doing exhibitions with the material, figuring out how it's represented online, and talking to the people who are in the digitization department about caring for the material in whatever way. the cataloging department, making sure that the information is as accurate as we can hope for, given the massive, hundreds of thousands of moving pieces in our machinery. And when I say machinery, I don't mean just the scanner. I'm talking about all the different departments we have, all the different personnel, the backup servers, whatever. Making sure that it's all done with a great deal of respect and reverence for hip hop, for the community that feels an ownership of it now and a membership in hip hop now, as well as the communities that birthed hip hop. That needs to be essentially job number one. I'm from Detroit. My grandfather worked in the Ford factory for like 50 years. So I use this reference. In the thing with Ford, their motto used to be quality is job number one. That was their motto for many generations. So I've said that before with regard to how Cornell navigates the waters of having a hip hop archive, or a collection of archives in this case. Quality and respect is job number one.
Indeed.
All right. So that's where the philosophy came from in establishing the advisory board. So I was on the advisory board for 4 years, and during that time, I was working at Cornell in a role called the K through 12 Outreach Coordinator, in an office called the Cornell Public Service Center. I wouldn't want to bore you with the specifics there, but essentially it's about taking resources and people, students, professors, graduate students at Cornell, and putting them out there in the communities to, do tutoring or after school programs or SAT prep, all with children who fall within the kindergarten through K through 12 range. Anyhow, after 4 years in May 2011, so this is almost a decade ago, I was actually sitting right here, believe it or not. I got an email from Catherine saying that, long story short, I would like to offer you the position of working with the Hip Hop Collection full time. And, it took me all of 3 seconds to make that decision that, yeah, I'm gonna do that. So I've been in my role for a decade.
Yeah.
Which is kind of bugged out to reflect on that way. And in looking at how in July 2007, this group of approximately 6,000 artifacts from Johann Kugelberg and Joe Konzo, 6,000 artifacts. Wow. It was a lot. It was all dope. But in looking at how from there until now, we estimate that we've got well over 500,000 artifacts in the Cornell Hip Hop Collection. It is like it's become one of the defining things about my life. I don't mean to sound too
No, I believe that.
Sappy or syrupy when I say that, but that is true. That is one of this has become the most defining thing about my life, and my career and my dream job and all that. It's a great confluence of everything I've done, from just being a hip hop nerd my whole life to working at a university for so long, doing outreach work, learning how to communicate with all types of different groups, developing teaching skills and public speaking skills and everything. It is all come to this moment.
All prepared you for this role.
Yeah. And, I say we've got 500,000 artifacts. that's the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other things out there in the world that need to be preserved and collected and made available for the rest of the world to learn from.
Right.
But, you know, a lot of it is stuck up in somebody's storage unit or on somebody's hard drive.
Yeah.
You know, what we call that born digital material. As we were discussing before, virtually all photographs and all film footage today is digital. It's born digital. It's not about how many boxes are we bringing in, you know. It's about terabytes. And every time people throw away their old phone, over the iPhone came out in '08. Think about how much information has been lost just because people didn't back up their phones when they got a new phone.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Hopefully people are smarter about backups, especially when it comes to photos and videos today. I always preach that
I think
to
phones
audiences.
make it easier to do that now too.
Yeah, like it's all ephemeral, you know. Yeah, it's easier to back up. Sure, there's cloud space.
Right.
There are pros and cons to everything. But one thing I preach to audiences and to anybody watching this right now, I really want you to know you shouldn't throw anything away, especially when it doesn't take up any physical space. If you are an artist, a creator, a scholar, let's just say, for example, you're a photographer. You're a budding photographer, somebody who is exploring, you know, getting more serious about photography. There are going to be years and years where the photos you produce, you're going to think are trash. And as you get better, you're going to look back at your earliest stuff and say, oh, that's horrible. I hope nobody ever sees that. All I'm saying is do not throw it away. You will very much appreciate the fact that you saved it for various reasons, whether it's to assess your growth, whether it's to realize you actually captured some important stuff and didn't realize it at the time, which was the case with Joe Conzo. Again, just taking pictures of his friends in high school who happened to be the Cold Crush brothers, you know?
Right.
And he's got this early snapshot, if you will, of the hip hop community that is invaluable and unique. And we should all thank our lucky stars for Joe Conzo, you know?
Indeed.
So I like to preach that methodology to people. And now, you know, when we're talking about physical stuff, I'm not talking about, you know, every record player you ever owned. I'm not talking about saving. I'm not literally talking about saving your old phones. I'm talking about saving the information on the phone. You know, we don't have like thousands of boom boxes, for example. As cool as that would be. Yeah, I wish we had space, but we don't. We don't store very much sound equipment, electronic equipment. In rare instances, we do, but it's more so about think about a cassette tape. Okay, cassettes are played on boom boxes. Yes, boom boxes are important parts of hip hop culture, especially in the 1980s. Right. What's really important to a researcher, 99% of the time, is the music on the cassette, not which model of boombox it was. Because you can look at a model of a boombox and it's going to be exactly the same across any, you know, unless you could certainly modify it, but it's not like information dense in the way that the cassette itself is. Joe Conzo's camera isn't necessarily something we would want to save. There's a sentimental value to his camera. Oh my God, this is the camera he used in 1979. But you can't do a lot of research on that. The photographs, however, that's where all the real information is. So we're not about museum pieces as much as we're about actual. Yeah, that's not really. our thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say we don't have some stuff like that, but we don't go around hunting for museum pieces like that. We're interested in building relationships with creators, or as I like to call them, cultural VIPs. So that's musicians, dancers, painters, creators, journalists, photographers, whatever, promoters, agents, whatever. And when we build a relationship with that person, it's about what are the things that you saved and what are the things that you want to ensure survive for all time. And when I say all time, I'm not talking about 50 years from now. I'm talking about 500 years from now.
Yeah. Like the history books.
That's what we do, you know? We're not a museum. Oftentimes people are quick to think that we're a museum. Right. They might want to, I want to come check that out and walk around your display area. And it's not like you're going to walk in and see like Rakim's first microphone under glass. That's not what we do. That's a museum. Right. You know what I'm saying? We're an archival library. We're for people who want to sit down in the research room and go through the boxes and get the information contained therein. Form of digging. Yeah. It's another form of digging. Absolutely. 100%. That's right.
So Ben, how do you convince someone that the Cornell Hip Hop Collection is the best home for their archive?
How do we convince someone that the Cornell Hip Hop Collection is the best home for their archive?
Do you actively seek out people who you've heard have these collections, or is it usually that they contact you? Or
well, let me clarify. So those to me are two distinct, different concepts, right?
Okay.
So I don't want to mischaracterize what we do. We do not try to convince people. What we want to do in the course of building a relationship with an individual is show them who we are and show them what we do and what our facilities are like, what our infrastructure is like, what our track record of what we've done with the materials that we already have here is. And anybody who has ever put anything in the Cornell Hip Hop Collection has absolutely come to that conclusion on their own, based on observation, not so much needing to be convinced. All right. I think that there's a bit of some people might think that there is a competition between the different archives. And I know that some people in the profession even feel that way. But I have said from day one, I've said it publicly many times. Let me say it again. Anybody doing any archiving of hip hop is doing right for our community, our culture. We're all in this belly of the beast, you know. I don't put this right here above my identity as a hip hop head. All right. So if I was on a panel right now with somebody who had an H from Harvard on their hat, that's my brother, that's my sister in this work. Right. Unlike our hockey teams who want to beef with each other, that's not what this work is. And that's not how people should think about it. This is not a competition. The other question you asked was, you might have to remind me how you phrased it.
Do you get contacted by individuals?
Oh, yeah. The answer is yes, all the time. We get contacted by people who have heard about us and are interested in depositing their material here. The process of determining what material. So we have finite resources, finite people power, finite physical space, finite digitizing capacity, and finite financial resources. Okay. So we have to be judicious in determining how to spend our money, our physical space, our people power, our processing capacity, because we have an entire network of people working on all this stuff, the cataloging, the digitization, etc. We have to be judicious. So it's not that we turn people down. It's not like that. We do, however, tell people that, you know, while it is nice that you have a copy of that record, what we're looking for specifically is somebody who has a collection that they've built up that has a wealth of material already in there. And we're not interested in being duplicative. All right. So if I've already got Africa Bambaata's record archive, and then DJ XYZ comes along and says, I've got a record archive also, I think that there's a chance that the majority of that section of records, assuming they're of a similar generation, there's going to be a lot of duplication. And what you don't want to do is separate out different archives. Shout out to my man Brian Davis, JP Non, some local music percussion legends right here. What up, fellas? I'm representing for y'all right here. I am, what we don't want to do is separate up people's archives. You don't take somebody's archive and sell off pieces of it here and there, because then somebody doing research about that person would have to travel to all these different places. And it becomes, that person's legacy gets scattered and dispersed. So I don't want to give people the wrong impression that we're just turning people down left and right. But we have a queue of individuals who have approached us, and some of them are in varying stages of the development of their relationship with us. Of course, COVID-19 and this pandemic has really messed up a lot of those processes, put them on hold in many different ways. And as far as seeking people out on our own, that's not been something that we do. We don't cold call somebody, hey, Dr. Dre. I don't know if you've heard about us, but that's not what this is. We have a network that we've developed over time. Again, we started with Joe Konzo and Johan Kugelberg approaching us, or at the time I wasn't on the team yet. They approached Cornell, and their network led to the explosion of growth in material that we've experienced, in the first part of the 2010s. And then from there's another peripheral network of people who approached us, and was interested in learning more about our operation and saying, I'm considering parting with my archive. Right. And that's a more rare thing if you think about it. Somebody who is in the midst of their career isn't really thinking about their legacy in an archive just yet. But I like to talk to people. About that. Hey, you really should think about one day you're going to end up in a place like this. Your material is. So don't throw anything away. Learn about how these places operate so that you can understand the importance of legacy, the importance of somebody doing a research piece about you. You know, I really enjoy having that conversation because it's true. Most people aren't anywhere near thinking about legacy when they're
Right.
still trying to build their career, you know. So we don't approach people for their material. We might approach somebody because we want to meet you. We want you in our network, or I would like you to come do a talk here, which again, that's another issue with the pandemic. Everything's like this, virtual. Honestly,
Hmm.
it's a little bit easier to plan and execute, though. Um, so approaching people is not for their material. Approaching people is to develop a relationship, have them learn about what we do, um, understand the value of legacy, the value of archiving, the value of preserving material, the value of understanding that your stuff, luckily, it's been safe in your attic, but you're one house fire away from disaster. You're one, home invasion away from disaster or a flood or whatever. So really just getting people to go, hey, I got to think about this. And it's not about, is it us? Again, it for me, it's about important hip hop cultural material getting preserved. Whether that's at Cornell or not, I am personally, I'm agnostic about that. I understand that I'm speaking from a position of already being at a place that has a wealth of archives. Nevertheless, we don't have we don't have but a sliver of what there is to collect and preserve in hip hop. Yo, shout out to Why Not? What up, brother, man? Um, I know that you interviewed Why Not recently.
Hmm.
I really, we love the hip hop heads love to shower one another with respect whenever the opportunity arises. Uh, Why Not is one of the deepest, most thoughtful hip hop heads that I've had the pleasure of having a very long talk over some very caffeinated dark roast coffee with. He's a phenomenal educator in his own right. So, yo, I hope everything's all right out there in Milwaukee. I heard there was an unfortunate incident there the other day. Hope everything's safe with you, man. My man JP, how do you scroll these comments?
Here, I can read it for you.
Yeah, making me want some coffee now.
Does an
JP asked something
artist
about,
does an artist still retain all their content rights when their work enters archive?
yes. Well, it's so what we do is we tailor the arrangement for each person. So in the case of somebody like I keep mentioning Joe Conzo, let me mention another photographer that I want to give some love and some shine to, Big Brother Ernie Panicoli, whose archive we just recently put approximately 20,000 of his photographs that we've digitized and cataloged online. Ernie retains the intellectual rights to his material. We preserve and have custodianship, ownership of the physical slides, the physical negatives. If there's any, prints or magazines, or even in his case, he's got T-shirts and books, all mixed in his archive. We retain the physical material, but we do not have the rights to the intellectual property. In fact, whenever someone comes to our website and they see, okay, we want to use Ernie's photograph of person X, Y, and Z in our newspaper article. Newspaper, for all you kids, was this thing you used to be able to read back in the day, right? But they, some magazine or something approaches us and says, we want to use these for a story. Great. We can provide you with the high resolution scan, but first you have to get approval from the artist, who may also ask you for so that he's able to continue to monetize his own work. We become an infrastructure for his continued monetization. And this is the arrangement with everybody, fundamentally, that we've got. There are some different There are some different characteristics of each person's contract, but to us, again, it's about preserving the material, not monetizing it at all. We want to preserve it. And if we can help you continue to make money off your life's work by doing so, let's go. That's what we do. Some people have portions of their archive where there might be some sensitive information. There might be something that, for some reason might be sensitive. Okay. And they're allowed to put in their contract with us a stipulation that says, box 12A may not be opened until the year 2050.
Wow.
Or some variation of that. We do have those characteristics. So, for anybody who's out there and thinking about preserving your material in a space like this one day, do please realize that you're in control in terms of determining those types of characteristics of your contract. So thank you, JP, for that question. That's a very, very, very good and important question for you, for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben, can you share one or two of your favorite moments or stories from your time working with the collection, whether it's attending a lecture given by a hip hop legend or viewing a collection for the first time? Or I know you've been there a while, so there's a lot, but are there any that stand out more than others?
I've got a whole decade of them. Yeah. I'll tell you what, the first thing that comes to my mind is this. In the early part of the 2010s, we put together a program called the Cornell Hip Hop Collection Visiting Scholar Program. A visiting scholar is a type of faculty member, right? So there are different levels to being a faculty member: visiting scholar, scholar in residence, assistant professor, associate professor, lecturer. They're all sort of they're all a type of faculty. All right. We were able to make DJ Africa Bambaataa our first visiting scholar at the Cornell Hip Hop Collection. And this was, I want to be very, very clear. This was in the early part of the 2010s, prior to the controversy that you may be aware of, where Bambaataa was accused of having sexual impropriety with a minor. I don't think that's a shock to anybody at this point. That's about a half a decade ago that came out, and that has very much been a hot topic of discussion. But to your question, what is a moment that stands out? This was in the year, I believe, 2013. I believe 2013, possibly early 2014. As one of Bambaataa's visits to campus, which, by the way, what he would do on those visits is give lectures in different classes. So some of them were public lectures for the public, and some of them were specific in specific classrooms dealing with different subjects. The music department, Africana Studies and Research Center. I had him speak with our EOP students at Cornell at one point. But on this particular trip, we brought along with him Cool DJ Red Alert, DJ Jazzy J, Marley Marl, and Breakbeat Lou. And as part of that visit, I organized an event downtown here in Ithaca, New York, at one of our music venues, which at the time was open. It actually closed about a year or so before the pandemic. It's called The Dock, right on the lake. And the event was Again, Africa Bambaataa, Red Alert, Molly Mall, Jazzy J, and Breakbeat Lou all on stage together with two sets of turntables, digging through Bambaata's archive, pulling out records, and telling stories about them. All right? So they would be like, here's this, whatever, Frisco Disco, play a couple of minutes of it or a couple of seconds for the audience, and then tell a story about it. It wasn't a dance party. It was a seated audience, but it turned into standing room only. One of the most, I think we very much broke fire code that day. Though I feel like the entire city was there. So for a glorious like 3 hours, the audience was treated to these five legends on stage digging through BAM's archive, telling stories about records that they were pulling out. And I've put together a lot of programs in my lifetime, in my professional career, not just in the hip hop collection, in all my years prior, but specifically working at the hip hop collection. I've put together a ton of programs and events. I can say that one really is head and shoulders my favorite one that I have ever put together for so many different reasons. Not just the emotional connection that the audience was making, or the glorious situation of having these particular legends here on stage talking to us about these records, but the information that was being shared. Somebody did record it. There was a filmmaker who's doing a documentary about Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation prior to the controversial incident that I was talking about. So she's got that whole thing on film. One day, perhaps we'll be able to share that with the world. I don't know. I can remember, driving to the place myself hours beforehand, rigging up all the turntables and the mixers and like being like triple sure I didn't plug in anything the wrong way. I had it all set up, lovely, fresh needles. I also worked with my homegirl, Eden, who is a chef, a really health, plant-based focused chef. Bambaataa was very into eating very healthy and vegetarianism. And I had her cater their dinner right outside on the deck on the water just before the program. Everything from the food to the program itself, everything was just like perfect that day. When something like that happens. Another thing, I guess another thing I should mention is that in the spring semester of 2013, I put together my first large scale exhibition, which we have a gallery space in the library right outside the research room and the storage vault. And it's a large gallery room and it rotates every few months. So in the spring of 2013, I was given the opportunity to put together, Breakbeat Lou just got up in here. Lou, you just missed my anecdote about you, Lou. Big brother, how are you? Much love. I miss you. But I put together this large scale exhibition, and this is a gallery that normally features at max usually about 200 items in the exhibition. My exhibition had precisely 798, so almost 800 items. I will say, since Lou just joined, Breakbeat Lou attended the opening reception of that thing, and he walks in. Remember I told you I wasn't such a deep like house head until relatively recently? Well, Lou walks in with this big cat, and I'm like, is that Lou's bodyguard? Who's that guy? And he goes, yo, Ben, I want to introduce you to my friend Kenny Dope. And I was like, oh, why have I heard that name before? And I know, he had produced a lot of hip hop stuff, but of course, Kenny Dope is legendary for production of house music. Lou, I want you to know that that exact experience made me go, oh, snap. I got to do the math on house music. And it turned me into a house head. You know,
I have a framed Kenny Dope record around here somewhere.
do you? Did you say
Yeah.
framed?
Yeah,
Wow.
I framed a bunch of my vinyl, yeah.
You're about it. You're about it, Sound Sommelier. I'm
I'm
about that.
trying.
You're doing your thing, you know? And hey, can I shower some respect on you, please? These
Oh,
interviews that you're doing,
sure.
and they are absolutely critical and fun and enjoyable. I've watched a few of them in length in total at this point, and your questions are so thoughtful. And when you told me some of the questions you were thinking about asking me, you are absolutely doing your research on all of us,
I
and I
am.
think that
Well,
that's
I
really
need to show you guys the
appreciated.
respect.
Why not? Yo, why not? This is iced rooibos tea,
Roy
okay?
Bush. Yeah.
Non-caffeinated, very high in antioxidants. Take a picture of this every couple of days. Iced
That's some South African
ROO.
tea.
It's a
Roy
South
Bush.
African. That's right. You got it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yes, you are. You're doing some excellent work, and I want you to.
Thank you.
I think. I think you're probably aware of this, but let me just say it for my own peace of mind, and so that the audience understands that this is dovetailing with what my work is. Your work, you're essentially conducting what we call oral history interviews. Your Instagram page is a trove of information. It is an archive. All right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not lost on me because I'm always fully present. Everything we do right now echoes for generations. I get to look at stuff every day that was made thousands of years ago.
Right.
Your interviews that you're conducting now and into the future throughout your career, you're going to assemble something that is so information dense that you are going to have places interested in officially archiving your stuff on their servers, cataloging it, tagging the video, bringing you in to do talks about what was it like? What was it like doing that work? You know, so I appreciate this opportunity and to be in such company with some of the other people that you've interviewed is it does not get old to me. I am still pinching myself that I'm in this type of position because I am a fan first.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just a hip hop nerd from Detroit who is still over the moon that I have the career I've got. And you know, the idea that I can like look down at the comments and be like, yo, Breakbeat Lou, why not? Crazy Legs, what up, y'all? These are people that have been instructors to me and
No,
friends. And it's,
I appreciate you for saying
yeah,
that. This is the first time I've ever done this in a more like video setting. I've been a music journalist for the past decade. I've interviewed Bambaataa, George Clinton, Rich Medina, all those guys, and it's all words online, but I feel like the in-person, like the camaraderie of this kind of setup I like this a lot better, especially for
yeah,
future generations who don't necessarily want to
yeah.
read something.
Reading is so passe, right?
Oh yeah.
No, I think, you know, the multimedia approach, I feel like I'm hanging out with you in the same room. Yeah, the technology
Yeah.
we have right now is,
And
I
I'm
can't
one of
even
many.
fathom.
There's so many people doing what I'm doing right now. So I think that's a really good thing.
Well, at some point in time, you should absolutely set up kind of like a crew.
I mean, I'm
Uh,
the journalist Sincere, who's done over 100 of these, is a friend
yeah.
of mine. So he was my first
So
live.
oh, that's dope. See, you
Yeah.
know, like the network that you got, like I mentioned Joe Conzo and Ernie Panacoli earlier. They have a crew of photographers. They do, exhibitions together, panel discussions together. Um, this is what I foresee for you in the future. So I'm super excited. Um,
Uh,
Super
JP,
excited to see where you're.
just ask. Quarantine definitely prompted the shift to video.
I think that's Brian M.F. Davis.
Sorry.
Let me tell you about my man,
I
Brian.
still don't see the right words on there.
Yo, I want everybody out there to look. Brian, tell me in the chat, is there a website for the Comb Down yet? Or are you guys on Bandcamp at all or anything like that? Everybody, promo. Brian, my local conguero brother here, he's the conguero, the percussionist, along with Ashley Ickes, who's on the drum set for a band of mostly made up of very good friends of mine called the Comb Down, like comb your hair, the Comb Down. They do a lot of funk covers, soul and funk covers. I don't know if you guys have put together original tracks yet, but I'm in constant awe of my friends in the music community here. I'm constantly inspired by all of them. So I'm really happy that JP and Brian are up in here. But Brian, the PO box, hilarious. You gotta have an Instagram. It's like at the Comb Down or something like that. But did the quarantine cause us to do more interviews like this? I think in your case, Laura, absolutely. And in my case, yeah, all of my programming, that to the extent that I've done anything public, which has been only a few things, I've done lots of lectures for like classes and people in like a group, but not something for the public, so to speak, like this. It's all been video. I've got something coming up on December 4th, if I can plug my own thing. On December 4th, Friday, December 4th
at 8 p.m. This is for you, Ben. Plug away.
It's going to be on Zoom, 8 p.m. 8 p.m. on a Friday night. I'm putting together a panel of Native American and First Nations hip hop artists and cultural VIPs to speak on a panel with Ernie Penacoli, who is of Native American descent, specifically Cree background, and he is, as I said, he's a legendary hip hop photographer whose archive we have, and we've digitized a massive chunk of it and recently launched it online this past fall. And this program on December 4th is sort of celebrate that, but it is, to have a sort of a discussion about Ernie's influence, but also the communities of Native American hip hop artists, participants, fans, everything. People on the panel at the moment, which may or may not be added to, of course, Ernie Penacoli, my man Prophecy from a crew called Antithesis, B-Boy Remind from Style Elements crew, Superman, who is a multi-talented, like incredible, unbelievably talented artist. B History 101, what up? Peace. I'm looking to add at least one other individual to the panel, and the last person who I haven't yet mentioned is Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas.
Oh, nice.
Is going to be on that panel. So December 4th, 8 p.m. Eastern. It'll be on Zoom, but you'll see the advertisement for it, everywhere, Instagram, Facebook, all that. So I really enjoy being on your side, being the interviewer. I love facilitating conversations and discussions, especially with panels. There's a special thrill to it, to be the questioner, So, yeah.
So I have a question for you. So we're pretty much at midnight right now. I'm down to keep talking, but I'm also down if you want to, because I still have about half of my questions left to ask you. So we can keep talking, but I'm also, if you want to get going, I'm happy to schedule a part 2.
Maybe we can do that. Let's go like another 20 minutes though. If there's any
I just want to be conscious
questions
of
in the
your
audience,
schedule.
sure. Let's do like another 20 minutes, you know?
Yeah, I'm down.
If anybody out there watching has a question, please, you know. But what is your next
So it's
question, please?
kind of going off one of your answers to my last question. The shirt that I'm wearing is from the DJ Shadow and Cut Chemist Renegades of Rhythm tour, where
I peeped that.
where I got to like brush elbows with Bam before I got to interview him the following year. But what was it like working with Cut Chemist and Shadow to go through his archive to kind of put that together?
Yeah. The Renegades of Rhythm tour was like a really creative, thoughtful thing. All the respect to DJ Shadow and my big brother Cut Chemist, who I've gotten to know over the years quite well. I hold him both certainly in a extremely high regard. So the idea that I'd be able to you know, meet with them in any capacity was a thrill. You know, like I said, I'm a fan first, and sometimes I sound like a fan. I just want to point that out. It's okay to do that, people. Show that respect. Like I said, actually, here's how this went down. Bambaato's archive, his record archive, at first was in the care of in the stewardship of Johann Kugelberg, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote the Born in the Bronx book. And he and Bam formed a very close relationship at the time he was putting that book together. So this is in the early 2000s. Okay. Yo, Doc Sonic's in the house. What up, Doc Sonic? Another DJ's in the house. So Johann was the one who at first removed Bam's records from the old storage units and kind of cleaned them up and put them in a rudimentary alphabetical order. There's a lot more I could say about how that went down. Like I was physically there in the storage unit when the guy had to use the bolt cutters to cut off the padlock, and we lifted up the gate to see Bam's records for the first time in who knows how long. They were not in great condition. They were stacked vertically like this. You know, vermin had been up in there. It just wasn't a good scene. So, but that's all good. One of the reasons that we want this stuff is not so that it sounds pristine. It's not about that. It's about having the collection so that we can tell. A researcher fundamentally wants to know what he had. A researcher wants to look at the record on the back side. Which ones have a star next to it? That was the track he preferred. Mm-hmm. It's not so much about the songs themselves. Mm-hmm. You know, Bambaato's copy of whatever, you know, a Sly and the Family Stone record is going to sound the same as anybody else's. Right. You know, if you had a very keen ear, you might be able to hear where the Q burn is, where he's getting ready to drop it on the one. But that wouldn't be such a revelation. The one in a song is the one. Sometimes you might see a little notation. You might see some tape blocking out the record label so that the other DJs couldn't look over his shoulder and say, yo, what's that? I want to get that. But I was there at that time when Bam's records were first being revealed. But the fact that Johann had them he actually knew Shadow and Cut Chemist from working in the record industry prior. And prior to the record's arrival at Cornell, he had Shadow and Cut come through and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they got the idea to put Renegades of Rhythm together. So they actually selected the records that they wanted prior to the records arriving at Cornell. So it wasn't me sort of shepherding them through the stuff yet. So there's a subset of records, and we still have them in their subset. We got Group A on X date. And then later, we got Group B, which were the records used in Renegades of Rhythm, complete with the tape marks, the cue marks. There's like a little science to not simply marking where you want the beat to drop, but you can put a piece of tape at a specific type of angle so that the needle instead of the groove and lands precisely where you need it to be. And you saw the show. Anybody who saw the show knows there was a high degree of precision involved in that. It was like the Nutcracker Suite. It was like that level of like precision. Mm-hmm. I bet you didn't think you'd hear a reference to the Nutcracker Suite today, party people. So when those records, what's that?
Or K7.
K7. One of my favorite albums of all time, everybody. Comes out of my love of freestyle, I'm telling you. So when they brought the records to Cornell, that's when we got to meet them and interact with them. Yeah. Cassie, my homegirl Cassie's up in here. Cassie's another Cornell employee and a fellow Detroiter. She's also from Detroit. This is my longtime homegirl. What's up, Cassie? So DJ Shadow and Cut Chemist, we got to meet them after they had already selected. And the reason that they finally came to Cornell was when they were doing the show in Syracuse, which is an hour north from us, which we went to. That was when I saw it. I saw it in Syracuse, you know. We gave them a tour of the archives that day. I have a photograph posing with them with the Gettysburg Address. Wow. The one in Lincoln's handwriting. It's one of our most famous artifacts. What can I say? And we built a relationship with them from that point. And several other times throughout the years, I've had the good fortune of being able to build a little bit more with Cut, Shadow's an incredible legend. I just happen to have had the ability to build with Cut just a little bit more. So the more I talk to him, the more I'm just like, this is a bona fide musical genius right here, and a genuinely down to earth, regular ass dude who is like, he's not on some diva, not that anybody that I've mentioned today actually is, but I've met other people who happen to be a little bit more up in the clouds, But Cut Chemist is like, especially like, he invited me over to his house. He was like, yo, fondue. Do you like fondue? I was like, I've never had fondue, man. What should I bring? He said, don't bring it. Just whatever. Fondue. So,
really quick, going back to Destroy's Show Off Your Gems, his episode was one of my favorites.
See, I don't watch every episode. I wish that they were on demand a little bit more.
Should be on IGTV.
I gotta go back and look at them. Yeah, I don't. Mm-hmm. I've only caught like, I don't know. I've only caught like 6 of them, and I saw them all live.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them all live. My favorite one so far, Jay Vaz, who's a comic book illustrator and aficionado. His was, he blew my mind.
Yeah.
I've never met him in person, but we follow each other on Instagram. He blew my mind. Bobito Garcia's was fun as well, and that
I love him
more
so
than
much.
anything, his chemistry with Destroy, those two bugging out is just like, yo, it's like Laurel and Hardy up here.
That was one of my favorite interviews ever. Stretch of Bobito.
Oh yeah, man.
Oh, look who just jumped on. Look.
Holy hell. That's the second time that happened. Yo, Destroy. Love and respect. We were just talking about what did you say? Show me your gems. We're talking about the Cut Chemist episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Much love, brother. And I had mentioned him before because Destroy needs to revive House Buggin' with John Leguizamo for the 2020s. You feel me?
Mm-hmm.
Just putting that bug in your ear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Ben, the Cornell Hip Hop Collection launched the Black History Education via Rap Lyrics crowdsourcing project on Juneteenth this year to help educate and inspire a more in-depth look at the Black perspective. How do you feel that project was received?
Well, I think that it was received very well. I didn't get quite as much participation as I had hoped. That is to say, I was hoping like every day I'd open up Instagram and see like hundreds of submissions. But I think that it was more, the exercise of having people send in their reflections on particular songs, because specifically that project was to crowdsource a catalog of songs whose rap lyrics educate the listener on some aspects of Black history, which is a vast topic, of course. So that's not to say that the project has concluded. It's just I don't put out an Instagram every day. Please submit your song. In my opinion, the most fascinating and valuable aspect of doing that was to get people to reflect on what they learned from that particular song. So when somebody submits a song, they're supposed to type, "What did you learn?" or which lyric is most important to you, or So it's an ongoing project that I launched on Juneteenth this past summer. I suspect it will evolve going into the future. You know what I'm saying? It's not done, but it's not such an exhaustive list at the moment because it's supposed to be crowdsourced. I could sit in there and add all these songs myself. That's not what I want to do. That's not what the project is for. That's not what it's for. Frankly, I could see that turn into something like this. You
could do like a one-for-one. Like, I'm going to put this song on there today. Does that inspire any of you to put another one?
Yeah. That's an excellent idea. So it could take a lot of shapes.
Never know.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about him before. So you've taught several courses at Cornell, including hip hop, music, culture, and race with DJ Rich Medina. Have collaborative efforts like this taken place at Cornell this year with the pandemic?
Well, this year, meaning this academic year, this past fall.
It could have been in the spring too, just any time after.
Well, yeah, I guess the spring semester got shut down about a third of the way into it. So our university has a policy of no visitors at the moment. So that's not a thing we'll be doing in person in the immediate future. But doing some sort of lecture collaboration or something like that. Deadly Dragon, what up? You know, that's certainly something that is a possibility. There is a little bird told me that me and Rich Medina might be working on something for the spring semester. We'll see what happens. Um, he and I taught that course 2 summers in a row. And we may revive that at some point in the future. But, you know, if I can just say a quick thing about Rich, Rich is an exceptional lecturer, for so many different reasons. You know, his sort of, his way of communicating, concepts really does involve, if I say I'm relating things to, like, you know, whatever I said, basketball and the Nutcracker Suite, and I haven't even I'm surprised I haven't mentioned mountain biking yet. I'm looking at my bike right there. That's my other love. The way that Rich, you know, very colorfully illustrates concepts, is masterful. It's Carlin-esque. It's Chappelle-esque. Okay. I don't say that lightly. So, you know, but his career as an educator has blossomed in the 5 years or so since we taught that class for the first time. And, you know, I look up to Rich in so many different ways. I feel mentored by Rich. I feel, like there have been times when he pulled me aside and say, yo, I got to tell you this little gem about life, whatever the case may be. And I mean, like, real stuff, not on some comedy shit, but like real life stuff. To the extent that I can be proud of him, which sounds crazy to say, when I see him, fulfilling these different educator roles. He had an actual visiting professorship at a university last year. I had the honor of speaking in one of his classes, so I got to see him in that element. These things he's been doing, I believe he had a lecture residency at a historical society somewhere in Philadelphia. I forget the actual name of it. I'm sorry. He did some other stuff overseas. I think it was possibly in Amsterdam. I'm proud of Rich as an educator, you know, and, you know, I'd like to think that he really, really cut his teeth in a major way, with the course that I co-taught with him. But you want to know the truth? Those courses, I was like his TA. It was the Rich Medina show. And I was just like, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to sit over here and I'm going to bring up the slides. I'll fill in a gap if you need, but he was naturally gifted, and he's only grown and evolved into that role. So I think that's dope. I think that's so dope. I think that's so dope for him.
Okay, so we're at 12:20. I could shorten the rest of my questions to probably the 3 most important ones if you want to do that, or we can do a second half another time.
How many more questions you got?
Like 9.
How about this? Let's try to do a speed round, except for the last one. That's the most important. I know I'm verbose, so I'll try to be quick. All right, let's go.
That's fine. What can we expect from the Cornell Hip Hop Collection in 2021?
More virtual stuff.
All right. Has it been difficult to maintain social distancing guidelines with those requesting access to the collection?
Once we got our infrastructure set up, for on-site researchers, no. However, on-site researchers this academic year are only Cornell personnel.
Nice.
That's part of the strict guidelines Cornell has set up.
All right. Are the social persistencing live streams still taking place?
I wish I did have more time to talk about it. They are not. So long story short, I founded a thing here in Ithaca called the Ithaca DJ Festival 4 years ago now. The festival festival was canceled because of the pandemic. It was supposed to happen in late March, right at the beginning of every shutdown. So all the DJs, local DJs, all of my peoples were like, yo, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Somebody said, we should do it online. We should do it on Twitch. I said, what the hell is Twitch? So we got to talking and decided it would be better not as a singular event, but as a series of events where each DJ has enough time to really play and go into a set. Unlike in real life, the DJ festival is only one day and everyone has a 45-minute set. It doesn't feel like enough to a DJ, but to the audience, I try to stuff in more DJs. We ended up having, I want to say 9 weeks. Was it 9 weeks? If you take a look here, I'm gonna look at my computer right here. Okay. Ithaca, djfestival.com. I'm going to give you some data. Okay.
I like it. I like it.
All right. They went from, we started the first one on April 5th and we ended on June 3rd. So it was 9 weeks and twice a week. So we did 18 DJ thons. Okay.
Right. The fundraising element.
Each of them were 6 hours long. So we did 12 hours a week for 9 weeks. Each week had a different fundraising benefactor. Most of them focused on food security. So we did 2 of our local food banks, community centers, nonprofits, but we also did a suicide hotline. I'm struggling to remember everything, but we had 18 DJ thons, 108 hours total, 36 different DJs who participated, and we raised $10,448.71 over the course of those 9 weeks. I gotta say, the reason that we stopped has to do with the weather getting warmer in June, people starting to not want to be indoors watching a screen for 6 hours straight, and it was really grueling for me for 12 hours a week, sitting behind all of the equipment, basically running the whole. If I wasn't doing a set myself, I was managing all of the information on screen and the GoFundMe, and it was a lot. Advertising for the thing twice a week was a lot, and so because it was so grueling on me, I just thought to myself, I want to enjoy my summer as well. These things would start at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday and 6 p.m. on a Sunday. Well, there was one Sunday where I was kicking back and it was like a beautiful day and it was 5 p.m. and I was like, damn, I got to go inside for 12 hours and the days are getting longer and warmer. I'm going to start to hate this because I can't be outside. I decided that instead of growing to resent having to sit essentially in the TV studio, which I had my whole living room set up like a little studio. I just decided this is a good time to end this. Mm-hmm. We all thought the pandemic and the lockdown would be over by June or July, right? Yeah. There was no end in sight. So the options were end it on a high note, which we did, or just do it until it fizzles out, and that wouldn't have felt so good. But if anybody wants to look at more information, you can go to ithacadjfestival.com and check it out. Yeah, we made prolific use of Twitch. So I know that I said that this was supposed to be a speed round, but that thing was like, that was a major defining part of my pandemic. Mm-hmm. The more I reflect on it, the more I know, I don't know how many thousands of people we potentially impacted during this horrific time. Right. As DJs. This is DJs doing this. Mm-hmm. To me, that's profound. That is profound. Mm-hmm. So I'm very, 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 very proud of what we did. So I appreciate you asking about it.
course. I've got another one similar. Have you been able to keep up with your podcasts Funk First and work on them with everything else going on?
Unfortunately, no. And those two came to a conclusion mostly due to logistical reasons that were pre-pandemic. Shout out to somebody called, hold up, Nerds and HipHop. What a dope IG handle. I feel like I connect with you automatically. Nerds and HipHop. What up? Salute. Yeah, no, my two podcasts were excellent. They fizzled out for some slightly different reasons. Nothing like beef or nothing. Everybody who I did those with remain very dear friends of mine. But they were a lot of work. And sometimes you feel like you're kind of herding cats, and you get to the point where you go, you know what? Just like I said with our DJ thons, it's good to end on a high note, I think.
Yeah.
Some of them, you might think, what did we have, 6 or 7 episodes? I don't know. It's not a lot, but when I think about all the hours that went into each episode, I think I was making a mountain of a molehill and being a bit of a perfectionist with my editing, with, recording 6 hours discussions, hoping I'll have enough material for a 2-hour episode. That's a lot. So in the event that I get back into podcasting at some point, and I would love to, I love the medium of podcasting.
I think you
I love it.
Fantastic at it. And it was just a learning experience, those first two.
Yeah, that's right. I may revolve. I may revive one of those at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I may release like a lost episode.
Oh.
Randy Mason just joined. What up, MC? Respect. Everybody check this cat out. Skills upon skills right here. And he's an educator in the South Bronx. All right, so are we still in the speed round?
Yeah. So you mentioned your mountain biking earlier. Have you found more time to enjoy being outdoors? Have you found more time being outdoors? Have you found more time to enjoy being outdoors this year? As like a silver lining to what's going on.
That's most definitely a silver lining to the evaporation of nightlife. And in my case, I'm fortunate to have the type of job where for the majority of the pandemic I've been able to work from home, which if I want to just go outside for an hour, take a walk in the sun, I can do that. Mm-hmm. That is not, where I work on campus is 3 stories underground because that's where the vault is located. There's no sun, there's no window. So I could go upstairs for a break, of course, but just to go for a hike, like a real ass hike, that's not happening during the workday. But yeah, I mentioned mountain biking. Look, a lot of people are surprised. I am extremely nerdy about mountain biking. I like to fix my friends' bikes. I would feel comfortable calling myself an amateur bike mechanic, right? I've always loved bicycles since I was a child. And I got into riding on trails in the woods, aka mountain biking, when my family moved to a place that had woods. For part of my life, I didn't know what the hell woods were, right. Where we grew up. We were riding in alleys with broken glass. But mountain biking is an absolute love of mine. If anybody out there listening to this today or in the future wants any advice about how to get into it, I have all the recommendations. Any budget. And another thing, let me just mention this real quick. I know we're in the speed round. 3 days ago, I went mountain biking with my man, Dr. Louvel Brown. He's a friend of mine here. He happens to be the superintendent of the Ithaca City School District. He just bought a mountain bike, but it's an e-bike. So it's a pedal-assisted battery motor joint, right?
What?
We went on the trails, and the rest of us are like huffing and puffing, getting up these very steep hills. For those who don't know, when you're pedaling uphill, you have to go uphill to go downhill. Hello, Isaac Newton. Okay? That's called paying the trail gods. You got to pay the trail gods to get the downhill reward. Well, he's like on this machine like it's nothing. Now, I am going to start using that as a comparison when I'm talking about how people feel or used to feel about DJs using Serato and Tractor or streaming a Spotify account through their DJ software. You know what I'm saying? If I'm on an actual bike with no motor, is that like an analog set of turntables? And if I have a bike with no suspension, right? A bike with no suspension, that's like having Cool Herc's mixer. not the dope, whatever, Vestax something that has all the bells and whistles despite the fact you're using wax. So there's levels to it, and the technology parallels I think are interesting, but it dovetails with my peculiar interests. Again, mountain biking, y'all. Thank you for
Ben,
asking me about that.
If you ever want to write a memoir, I want to help. There are so many things about you. All right, so final 3 questions.
There might be more.
Yeah. So can you share a bit about what Claiming Williams Day represents and why it exists?
Right. Let's see. Williams College invited me to do a talk last year, it was the year before, for a week of programming they have called Claiming Williams, which, as I recall, was designed to have a week of programming just before classes start in the spring semester for all of the students on campus to attend various lectures and workshops that, as I recall, foreground and center the experiences of marginalized people. And frankly, I'd have to look at their website to get the actual language specifically correct about what that was. I never worked at that college. I only visited for that one lecture. But it's a beautiful, beautiful campus in Massachusetts. Shout out to Jessica, who brought me out there. The students and the staff were very warm and welcoming, despite the fact that it was about 5 degrees outside. Yeah, very, very dope thing they do there every year.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, bear with me. This question's a bit of a mouthful. So you led a panel on community police relations in the context of the language and history of hip hop music in Ithaca more than 5 years ago. The panel was made up of local hip hop artists, educators, and law enforcement officers who shared stories of the personal relationships with the music and with the police. One Cornell police officer said that the thing that strikes me lyrically is the concept of fear. One of the best ways to reduce fear is to do what we're doing tonight, engagement. How do you feel that sentiment applies today?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. That was a really dope experience putting that panel together. Local hip hop artists with local police officers. And we listened to lyrics and analyzed lyrics and then talked about our community. And it was really something, and it was held at the Southside Community Center. I used to be on the board of Southside Community Center. I'm not any longer, but that was a very fantastic experience. How does the sentiment apply today? That the only way we're really going to understand one another is talking to each other? How does that apply today? That is a universal truth about our species. I don't think there's ever been understanding between two groups of people who have anything more than a negligible amount of difference between them. There's never been any understanding achieved without substantial conversation and discussion. As far as today, 2020 is concerned, the events of this past summer surrounding Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and too many others to name, which is the saddest thing to say. There are too many to even remember all of the names. And there was a brother in Brazil yesterday. So it's not a strictly an American phenomenon that someone would be brutalized by police. Discussions are absolutely necessary to arrive at understanding. I would say they're also necessary for arriving at real solutions, real solutions beyond, hashtag activism, relating specifically to the police. One thing that came out of this summer was hashtag defund the police. Okay. That is a complicated concept that was boiled down to a catchy little hashtag that really missed the mark, because pro-police organizations who happen to also be racist in their approach to policing, and I want to make that distinction. Not every organization that is pro-police is racist in its approach. They might be existing within a racist system, but they might also simultaneously be striving to undo the racist system. I'm talking about specifically groups that have a racist approach to policing, Back the Blue and things like that, Blue Lives Matter and so forth. Kyle Rittenhouse,
yeah.
Rittenhouse was on a street in a protest in Wisconsin, Kenosha, Wisconsin, and gunned down two protesters and was given a bottle of water and verbal support by police officers. That's the type of policing that I think rises to the top of the problematic scale. And there is a scale, a spectrum of problematic police. And I am not a person who is comfortable saying all police are bad people or all cops are bastards, right? I'm not comfortable saying that. I don't believe that that's true. I don't really like generalizing. I would say too many police have shown themselves to be problematic, and there are also too many more who have not yet shown it. We know this. This is, I think, too many is a relative term, but by any reasonable measure, there have been too many. Okay. Discussing the concept of defund the police allows, labeling it defund the police allows these organizations that I'm talking about to come back and use fear to rally support for their side. Real, actual support that manifested itself in, for example, Donald Trump receiving way more votes than he might have if defund the police had not entered our lexicon. That's just a theory. We'll see if someone's able to really quantify that and prove that. I have a theory. If defund the police was called differently fund the police, we may not have seen that type of backlash on their part. So now we have to really, really discuss these things. There's a, I forget his name. There's a YouTuber who is also an ESPN commentator. I'm blanking on his name, but he has a YouTube show, a podcast essentially called uncomfortable conversations with a black man.
Oh.
Okay. And he recently had an episode with several police officers. I believe they all happen to be from a city outside of Los Angeles. But it was a really substantive and well thought out conversation. I wish it was longer than a 20-minute episode. But it's exactly the type of thing that is needed to arrive at not only understanding, but policy solutions. Let's be clear. The only thing that's really going to solve a restructuring of problematic aspects of society, white supremacist structures within society, abusive capitalist structures in society, so on and so forth, is policy. Not somebody going, I feel like I like that group of people all of a sudden. And I want to say all the right things. Now, that's not bad. That's not bad to say, I want to support anti-racism. But the real solutions come from policies. And policies come from people who are either hired or elected into very specific positions within organizations, governmental structures. Policy is the name of the game. Policy, policy, policy. I'd like to see hashtag discuss policy. Maybe that already is a hashtag. I don't know. I'd really be interested. Yeah, I'd really be interested to move the conversation forward in that way. The NBA, which I mentioned before, I'm a big fan of the NBA and basketball in general. During their bubble, during the pandemic this past season, what started off as having the names and phrases of, for example, freedom, say her name, equality, and stuff like that printed on their jerseys where their names used to be, or on the floor, Black Lives Matter on the NBA hardwood, was phenomenal. And that evolved into the NBA Players Association. Chris Paul is the leader, along with other high-powered individuals, LeBron, Carmelo, and many others, talking to league leadership about what policies they can enact to actually move things forward. For example, converting many of the NBA arenas into voting centers during the election, for example, among many other things. So that's an example. That's a real example of taking the hashtag activism and the actual, out in the streets, rah, rah, rah stuff, the protests, and moving it forward to an actual part of its evolution where solutions are in fact happening. I'm intrigued by that part of the conversation. So I appreciate the question. And this is, let's be real, guys, this is not really a speed round at all.
No. I've got one more at
a speed round. I know, I'm sorry. A speed round would be like, what's your favorite color? What was your first pet's name? Those sorts of things. Yeah. Anyhow,
well, you said that it would be, yeah, so last question.
I'm chilling. I'm chilling.
Me too.
I'm good.
Yeah.
You got the last question, though.
So you've also said in a recent interview that the popularization of hip hop is a major component that led to the awakening or wokeness of all the white people out in these protests. Do you think hip hop, its history, has the ability to reach people of all ages, races, and socioeconomic backgrounds in ways those in power have struggled to realize?
Yeah, I think hip hop has already done that. It's already reached certainly every corner of the globe. And I promise you there are researchers in Antarctica listening to hip hop as well. But where it really finds a a very strong foothold. Yo, James DeWitt Yancey Foundation, Dilla's in the house.
Tony.
My Dukes and Tony, what up, y'all? Salute, salute. Much love and respect. Where hip hop really tends to find a strong foothold at first in the United States, of course, but then beyond, we get in every dispossessed corner of the globe where you find people who have a marginalized identity, whatever that is. All right. So sometimes we talk about, I don't know, we talk about different groups of people sort of falling under an ethnicity umbrella, or what would be called a pan ethnicity, like the word Latinos, for example. Okay, there's a world of diversity underneath that umbrella. Virtually every walk of life, more or less, can be found under that umbrella. I think it's fascinating to think about further refining and actually simplifying the mega groups of people in the world. Okay, what if we start looking at the citizens of the globe as simply haves and have-nots? Is there not an identity, a common identity? Is there not a sense of camaraderie that could be achieved with all of the world's have-nots, the dispossessed, marginalized people? So actually, I don't mean to sound like I came up with this concept. This is the way I look at the world, certainly, but it is worth mentioning that a lot of people believe that Martin Luther King Jr. ultimately got assassinated because he turned his attention towards unifying people across all racial lines to have them feel commonality with one another because of their socioeconomic status, which people in power may have felt like that was a little bit too revolutionary. So the conspiracy theory, let's call it a conspiracy theory, was that he was assassinated by someone in our government who saw the logic in what he was doing, and that this could be a disaster for us, the people in power. That said, I do think MLK was really, really on to something, and I was privileged to take part in a project we did here in Ithaca many years ago, back in 2010, 2009. It was called the MLK Community Build. And it was a group of educators and activists who got a grant to do a custom printing of about, I think it was like 20,000 copies of Martin Luther King's last book called Where Do We Go From Here? Community or Chaos, and distributed those for free around the community, and set up different reading groups and discussion groups. Some were affinity based and others were just groups of friends. And it was a community-wide thing. We're fortunate to have a community that's of a size where you could pull something like that off. I was fortunate enough I did the graphic design for the cover and the back cover of the book. And I also led my own discussion group. And contained within that book is a lot of the philosophy and information that really goes to the heart of what I'm talking about here. Seeing the world not as, oh, you got your ethnic group A over here, and you got your racial group B over here, and you got your nationality C over here, but instead looking at the people of the world as the haves and the have-nots, the powerless and the powerful, the secure and the insecure. Okay. Ultimately, these things you're asking about, they're they're going to be the foundation of the next meaningful thing in hip hop, which is building off the events of this past summer, and utilizing them. You think about, you and I may be of a similar generation, perhaps. I already said early in this interview, it's no secret, I'm in my early 40s, right? Picture yourself being a 15-year-old right now. And what would the events of the past summer, again, relating to police brutalization, specifically of the Black community, but not limited to the Black community, right? How might those events shape your identity as a person? How might they be shaping an entire generation of people? Track it forward when this generation grows up, graduates college, gets their professions, whatever those might be. How did it impact that generation? Mm-hmm. Are we, in fact, on the precipice of some serious change waves here in society? And as far as hip hop is concerned, the next generation of hip hop artists is cutting their teeth right now with this subject matter. Excuse me. That's not to say that well-established hip-hop artists aren't partaking in the social activism through lyricism. Of course they are. There's still a lot of junk food going on. Mm-hmm. All right. When I talk about music to students, I often talk about lyrical content as being like food. There's nutritious food and there's junk food. I like junk food just as much as anybody else. But if I eat it for every meal, we got a problem. Yeah. I'm going to develop a lot of disease. Mm-hmm. I'm going to develop a lot of diseases, shorten my lifespan, and stunt my development. Same thing goes for your cerebellum up here. All right. Lyrical content. I'm very fortunate to come out of a generation where we prized, intelligence, over almost anything, with our MCs. Now, that's not to say that there aren't intelligent MCs today. I think some of the most intelligent hip hop has been made in the last 10 years. The problem is most people don't hear it. Why? Because the music industry isn't really trying to put their marketing dollars behind those artists. Right. You have some outliers. Okay. You've got your Kendrick Lamars, you've got your Commons, you got your Black Thoughts, and there's other people just beneath that top crust of superstars, But when you talk to far too many casual hip hop listeners today, they're really just bumping something because of the vibe, not because of it really speaking to them. I really hope that's about to change. A lot of us older heads have been lamenting that for the better part of 2 decades at this point. Ever since DMX was barking at people, like, yo, what happened to MCs? Uh-huh. Why does everybody like this guy? That kind of stuff. So I much like the LA riots really shaped hip hop subject matter for at least a generation. Let's see what happens with this. We're already seeing some phenomenal music being created and released now. So, we should check back in like a year from now and see where things are. We'll have a vaccine and a well-established new president and vice president. We may have control of the Senate, and that's just looking at national politics. What's going to happen with local politics? Hopefully everybody can start to really connect the dots between paying attention to what's going on with politics and the policy that is created with it, and all this stuff that everyone's like rah, rah, rah about. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully a year from now I can be up there interviewing you in person.
We'll see, man. We'll see. I feel like these dialogues, they got to be ongoing. And I sure do wish I sure do wish Instagram would allow more than two people here, because
Yeah.
a panel would be dope. But that's we gotta hit up Mr. Zuckerberg and say, yo, what's up with this?
I don't know
You
how they
know,
did it, but De La Soul was able to figure out a way to get the three of them on here at the same time. I don't know how they
that's
did it.
that's their magic people. You know what I'm saying? De La
Yeah.
Soul, come on. They are magicians, and they probably got access to some kind of prototype protocol in IG.
Mhm.
Or they just have a wizard technician. You know who I bet could figure this out? Um, Mark Hines, who is Rich Medina's right hand man with the Marksman crew. He's the one that runs all the tech and the video. If you've watched his Twitch stuff, Mark Hines probably could figure this out. I'm gonna hit him up.
Let's task them with that.
Anyway,
Well,
yeah.
Ben, I
Well,
really
we
appreciate you
we
taking
talked
all this time.
for 3 hours.
3 hours, yeah. I'm not surprised based off our phone conversations, but yeah.
That's amazing. I did not expect that. Thank you for
Thank you.
making
I
it
mean,
feel like 45 minutes, because
yeah,
it flew by. It was enjoyable.
yeah. One Below was 2 hours. That was my longest one until today.
Yeah.
Uh, we should stay in touch, but I really appreciate you. Is there anything else you want to add or promote before we say goodnight?
Well, for the people watching still, like I said, I got a big Zoom panel taking place on Friday, November 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's to celebrate Brother Ernie Panicoli's digitization of his archive that we put up online this past fall. It's going to be a panel of Native American hip hop artists, First Nation hip hop artists. There might be some other people added to the panel. At the moment, it's Ernie Panicoli, Superman, Prophecy, B-Boy Remine, and Taboo. So hopefully we'll get a lot of viewership from that. I'm going to start the promo shortly. It's free and open to the whole public via Zoom. And that's what
Definitely
I'll promote
promo,
at
and
the
I'll help
moment.
you get the word out.
Word up, absolutely. And I want to shout out all the legendary and beautiful people that we saw come in the chat
Mm-hmm.
in here. All the people who I don't know who got to watch. Thank you, for your time and attention, and hopefully we can build at some point in the future. Um, I'm ever thankful for people like you and for opportunities like this. I think that this is exactly what we need in hip hop. So, just keep doing what you're doing. You're gonna have an impact that you can never dream of until somebody comes back to you one day like, yo, you have no idea how you impacted me, and that's gonna happen to you.
As long as I keep getting
Tony,
yeses, I'll
my
keep doing
Dukes,
it.
one love to y'all too. Say it one more time.
I said, as long as I keep getting yeses when I ask people, I'll keep doing it.
You will. You will. Hopefully Tony and my Dukes heard that. You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
I interviewed my Dukes years ago. She's one of my favorite people.
Oh, she's one of everybody's favorite people.
That's true. That's true. I saw the
And
interview you did with them and Crazy Legs a couple weeks ago, I think.
Crazy Legs, the connections that he's able to make. I showered him with gratitude and respect early on in this conversation, but
Mm-hmm.
another one of the most, frankly, one of the most impressive human beings I've had the chance to get to know, and one of the people who is making an impact on hip hop that is still massive and global.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's reached his peak yet.
Yeah, I didn't even ask about his son. That's a whole other
Oh
conversation.
yeah, what up, Richie? Shout out to Richie, a Cornell graduate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, much love to
But yeah,
you, and
thanks so much, Ben.
hopefully somebody got a question. You know where to find me. I'm sure it'll be linked all in this. But
Oh yeah, this is
until
gonna
next
go up
time,
on YouTube,
everybody.
and I'll promote it.
Peace. Much
Have
love.
a good night. Thanks so much.
All right.